Lynching, by definition, is a punishment carried out by most oftenly hanging without approval from the law. Unfortunately, African Americans were the main target of lynching. The embarrassment and vengeance of the South after the Civil War once again raged into an all-out battle between whites and blacks. White supremacists could not accept the fact that black people would be able to gain rights. The Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist group, unified the whites that were fearful of losing their way of life. Due to this fear, they acted out in rash ways against African Americans. Unfortunately, through the early to late 19th century, around 2,400 black men, women, and even children died due to lynchings. The victims of lynching were often framed for false crimes such as rape, sexual harassment, and even not giving enough respect to a white person in their community.
The origins of lynching come from the town of Lynchburg, Virginia, during the time of the Revolutionary War. Local courts were not common at this time, so justice was taken into the hands of the people as an extra-legal justice. At first, the concept of lynching was not predicated to race, but in the year of 1866, the number of black lynchings exceeded the number of white lynchings. This point marked the time where lynching became a term with racial connotation. From this point, the number of black lynchings would far exceed the number of white ones.
A more modern example of the lynching and racism in the South comes with the case of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy who was lynched on August 25, 1955, for committing a non-existent crime. On August 24, 1955, Emmett Till and his friends visited the Bryant grocery store after spending a day in the fields cotton picking. During the time at the store, Emmett is accused of harassing Caroline Bryant, who is an owner of the store. His harassment included making sexual remarks at her or even touching her. The next morning, Roy, who is Caroline's husband, and Roy's half-brother, J.K. Millam, were on the lookout for Emmett. They even appeared at Emmett's uncle's home in search of him. Once they found Emmett, they put him in a truck and drove him to a plantation. Emmett was not found for 2 days until he was discovered by two boys fishing. His body was mutilated with marks of torture, gunshot wounds, and a fan belt tied around his neck. The body was so unrecognizable that he was only identified by a ring on his finger.
The trial was leaned to the side of the convicted, J.W. Millam and Roy Bryant from the beginning. They got support of most of the South. When they could not afford a lawyer, one stepped up to represent them. So instead of the victim getting more support, the criminals became the patrons of the people from the South. Even after a non-biased witness, Willie Reed, identified Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam as the people placing Emmett Till in the truck that would ultimately bring him to his death, the all-white jury gave a verdict of not guilty, and acquitted Bryant and Millam of all charges. After the trial, the two men were paid a large sum of money by the magazine company Look in exchange for their confession, and faced no charges afterward.
They murdered that boy, and to hide their dastardly act, they tied barbed wire to his neck and a heavy gin fan, and dumped him into a river for the turtles and the fish.
Lynchings such as Emmett Till's made a lasting impact on African Americans during the 1900s.
The effect of lynching was to basically terrify African Americans and keep them from doing certain things, voting, living in certain places, gaining certain economic advantages. If you're talking about in the mid-20th century efforts to alleviate the effects of lynching, then yes, you have things like the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act at the federal level to try to address the effects that lynching had been having in the South.
The racial terrorism of lynching in many ways created the modern death penalty. America's embrace of speedy executions was in part an attempt to redirect the violent energies of lynching, while ensuring white Southerners that black men would still pay the ultimate price.